Most people who walked past the old gas station on Route 9 never noticed the boy sitting on the curb every afternoon at 3:15, carefully unwrapping a packed lunch and handing it to the weathered man who slept beneath the overhang. But Marcus Steele, Garrett noticed everything, especially when something didn't add up. And what he was about to discover would shake him harder than 30 years of riding with the Iron Reapers ever had. It started 2 weeks earlier on a Tuesday afternoon when Steele pulled his Harley into Miller's Gas and Go, a lonely outpost sitting between farmland and forest where the only sound was wind moving through tall grass and the occasional rumble of a passing truck. The place smelled like burnt coffee and motor oil, its single pump creaking slightly in the breeze while faded advertisements peeled from the windows. Steele was a massive man, 6'4" with shoulders that seemed too wide for doorways and a thick beard streaked with gray that made him look older than his 48 years. The leather vest bearing his Iron Reaper's patch creaked as he dismounted, and the clerk inside glanced nervously through the window before pretending to organize lottery tickets. Steele had been riding since dawn from a memorial service 3 counties over, honoring a brother who'd gone down on a slick highway curve. The long ride had left his body aching and his mind restless, so he welcomed the excuse to stretch his legs and grab something cold to drink. That's when he first saw them. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sat on the concrete curb near the air pump with a brown paper bag resting on his knees. He was small for his age, wearing jeans that looked a size too big and a faded blue jacket despite the warm afternoon. His sneakers were scuffed nearly white, and his dark hair needed cutting. Beside him, leaning against the station wall, sat a homeless man who looked to be in his 60s. His clothes were layers of worn flannel and stained canvas, his face weathered like old leather, and his hands trembled slightly as the boy carefully handed him a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Steele paused near the pump, watching. The boy didn't speak much. He simply opened the bag, removed the sandwich, an apple, and a small juice box, and placed them gently beside the man, who accepted them with a quiet nod. No words exchanged. No drama. Just a simple transaction that felt practiced, like it had happened many times before. Then the boy stood, folded the empty bag, and walked toward the road where a school bus stop sign leaned slightly to one side. Steele found himself staring long after the kid disappeared around the bend. The next afternoon, Steele rode past the station again. He told himself it was coincidence, that he just happened to need gas. But when he pulled in at 3:10, he slowed deliberately and watched the road. Sure enough, at 3:15, the boy appeared. Same routine, same brown back, same quiet exchange with the homeless man who waited beneath the overhang like it was an appointment neither would miss. Steele leaned against his bike, arms folded, studying the scene. The boy looked tired. Not sleepy tired, but the kind of exhaustion that sat deeper in the shoulders and the way he moved. And when he handed over the food, there was something careful in the gesture, almost protective. The homeless man ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the only meal he'd see that day, which, Steele suspected, it probably was. On the third day, Steele arrived early and bought a coffee. He didn't want just to have an excuse to linger. When the boy showed up right on schedule, Steele watched him pull the sandwich from the bag and noticed something that made his chest tighten. The sandwich was still warm, freshly made, and when the boy handed over the apple, Steele saw the kid's hands. Small, clean, but thin. The kind of thin that came from missing meals. Steele set his coffee down and walked over slowly, his boots crunching gravel. The boy looked up, startled, eyes widening slightly as the massive biker approached. But he didn't run, just clutched the empty bag tighter. Steele stopped a few feet away and kept his voice low, non-threatening. "That's a good thing you're doing," he said. The boy nodded but didn't speak. "You do this every day?" Another nod. Steele glanced at the homeless man, who watched silently, wary but not hostile. "What's your name, kid?" The boy hesitated, then answered quietly. "Ethan. I'm Steele." He gestured toward the empty bag. "That your lunch?" Ethan's face flushed slightly, and he looked down. "It's okay. I'm not that hungry." Steele's jaw tightened. He'd heard that line before, usually from people who were lying to themselves. "Where's your folks?" "My mom works," Ethan said quickly. "She makes my lunch every morning before her shift. And you give it away." Ethan's silence was answer enough. Steele crouched down slowly, so they were eye level. Up close, He could see the boy's collarbone pressing against his shirt, the hollow beneath his cheeks. "Ethan," Steele said carefully, "why are you giving away your food?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. He tried hard to blink away. His voice came out barely louder than a whisper. "Because if I don't, he won't eat at all." Steele felt something crack open inside his chest. "And what about you?" Ethan shrugged, looking away. "I'm okay." But he wasn't. Steele could see that now, clear as daylight. And suddenly this wasn't just about a generous kid. This was about something much bigger, something that was going to require more than a kind word and a pat on the back. Steele stood slowly, his mind already turning. "Stay here," he said. Steele walked into Miller's Gas and Go and bought everything they had that a kid could eat without cooking. Granola bars, crackers, beef jerky, chocolate milk, fruit cups. The clerk rang it up without comment, though her expression softened when she glanced out the window and saw Ethan still sitting on the curb. When Steele returned, he set the bags down beside the boy. "This is for you," he said firmly. "Not for sharing. For you." Ethan stared at the bags, then up at Steele, confusion and gratitude warring on his face. "I can't." "You can," Steele interrupted gently. "And you will." The homeless man spoke for the first time, his voice rough as gravel. "The boy's got a good heart." Steele met the man's eyes. "I can see that. What's her name?" "People call me Gus." Steele nodded slowly. "Gus, you eat today besides what Ethan brought." Gus shook his head. Steele walked back inside and returned with 2 hot dogs, a bag of chips, and a bottled water. He handed them to Gus without a word. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Gus's weathered face crumpled slightly, and he nodded once, the kind of nod that carried weight. "Appreciate it," Gus said quietly. Steele turned back to Ethan. "You live close." "About a mile up the road." "Your mom know you're giving away your lunch?" Ethan shook his head quickly. "She'd be upset. She works really hard to make it for me every morning." "Where's she work?" "2 jobs. Diner in the morning, cleaning offices at night." Steele's jaw tightened. He knew that grind. He'd watched his own mother work herself to exhaustion trying to keep food on the table when he was young. "And your dad?" Ethan's face closed off. "He left." Steele exhaled slowly. The picture was getting clearer, and he didn't like what he was seeing. A single mother working 2 jobs. A kid going hungry so someone else could eat. And a system that wasn't catching either of them before they fell through the cracks. "Ethan," Steele said carefully, "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. When's the last time you had a full meal?" The boy looked down, picking at the edge of the paperback. "I eat breakfast sometimes. At school. Sometimes. When I get there early enough." Steele felt anger rising, not at the kid, but at the situation. At the unfairness of a 10-year-old having to choose between feeding himself and feeding someone else. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marcus," he said when the line clicked. "I need you at Miller's Gas and Go on Route 9. Bring the truck and whatever food we've got in the clubhouse kitchen." A pause on the other end. Then Marcus's voice came through, steady and unbothered. "How much we talking?" "All of it." 15 minutes later, a pickup truck rumbled into the lot. Marcus Bear Thompson climbed out, a mountain of a man with a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos. Behind him came 2 more riders, Deke and Polly, both carrying boxes. Ethan shrank back slightly as the bikers approached, but Steele placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They're with me," he said, "and they're here to help." Bear set a box down and crouched beside Ethan with surprising gentleness for someone his size. "Heard you've been doing good work out here, kid." Ethan blinked, uncertain. Deke opened another box, revealing canned goods, pasta, rice, and bread. "This is for your mom, so she doesn't have to worry so much." Polly added a 3rd box, this one filled with clothes, including a winter jacket that looked brand new. "Noticed your coat's getting thin. Gonna be cold soon." Ethan's eyes went wide, and his voice cracked when he spoke. I don't know what to say." Steele squeezed his shoulder gently. "You don't have to say anything." They loaded everything in a Bear's truck, and Steele told Ethan to climb in. "We're taking you home. Gonna talk to your mom." Fear flickered across the boy's face. "She's going to be mad I gave away my lunch." "She's not going to be mad," Steele said firmly. "Trust me." The house was a small rental at the end of a gravel road, its paint peeling and porch sagging slightly. But the yard was neat, and flowers grew in mismatched pots near the steps. When Ethan's mother opened the door, she froze at the sight of 4 massive bikers standing on her porch. Her name was Sarah, and she was younger than Steele expected, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and hands that looked like they'd worked too many hours without rest. "Miss Harmon," Steele said carefully, removing his sunglasses. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just wanted to talk to you about your son." Sarah's face went pale. "Is he okay? Did something happen?" "He's fine," Steele assured her. "Better than fine. But there's something you should know." They told her everything. About the lunches. About Gus. About Ethan's quiet kindness and the weight he'd been carrying alone. By the time they finished, Sarah was crying, one hand pressed to her mouth. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I had no idea he was going without." "That's because he didn't want you to know," Steele said gently. "He was trying to protect you." Sarah pulled Ethan into a fierce hug, and the boy finally let himself cry, the weight of weeks crashing down all at once. Steele and the others carried the boxes inside, stacking them neatly in the small kitchen. When they finished, Bear handed Sarah an envelope. "There's a number in there," he said. "Food bank. Community center. People who can help. You call them." Sarah nodded, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. As they turned to leave, Ethan ran forward and wrapped his arms around Steele's waist. "Thank you," he said, his voice muffled against the leather vest. Steele rested a hand on the boy's head, his throat tight. "You take care of yourself, kid. And let other people help sometimes. You don't have to carry everything alone." Back at the gas station, Gus was still sitting beneath the overhang. Steele handed him another meal and a blanket from the truck. "There's a shelter 2 towns over," Steele said. "Clean beds. Hot food. I can give you a ride." Gus looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time." As they pulled away, Steele glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Ethan standing in the doorway, waving. And for the first time in weeks, Steele felt something other than grief. He felt hope. Word spread fast among the Iron Reapers. By the end of the week, the clubhouse had become an unofficial collection point for donations, canned goods, clothes, and cash piling up on tables usually reserved for beer and poker chips. Brothers who rarely spoke about feelings beyond the road were suddenly organizing food drives and calling local charities to figure out how to help families like Ethan's. Steele found himself in the center of it all, uncomfortable with the attention but unwilling to step back. Because every time he thought about walking away, he remembered that small voice asking why he gave away his lunch, and the answer that followed. "Because if I don't, he won't eat at all." The boy had been 10 years old and already understood sacrifice better than most grown men. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Steele returned to Miller's Gas and Go. This time, he wasn't alone. A convoy of motorcycles rolled into the lot, engines rumbling like thunder as a dozen riders parked in formation. They carried boxes, bags, and determination. Sarah had agreed to let them help coordinate with the community center, and within hours they'd set up a distribution point at the station where families could pick up supplies without judgment or paperwork. No questions asked. No shame attached. Gus showed up that afternoon, clean-shaven and wearing donated clothes. He'd been staying at the shelter Steele recommended, and the change was remarkable. His hands no longer trembled, and his eyes carried a clarity that hadn't been there before. "Got a job interview next week," Gus told Steele quietly. "Maintenance work at the shelter. Nothing fancy, but it's something." Steele gripped his shoulder. "That's everything, brother." Ethan appeared at 3:15, same as always, but this time he carried a lunchbox instead of a paper bag. When he saw the crowd gathered at the station, he stopped short, eyes wide. Steele waved him over. "What's all this?" Ethan asked, staring at the boxes of food and the families lined up to receive them. "This," Steele said, gesturing broadly, "is what happens when one kid decides to do the right thing. You started something, Ethan. Something bigger than you know." The boy looked around, taking it all in, his expression somewhere between awe and disbelief. Sarah emerged from her car, having finished her morning shift early to help organize. When she saw the scene, tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were different. Not despair, gratitude. She walked over and stood beside Steele, watching her son help carry a box to an elderly woman who could barely lift it herself. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah said quietly. "You don't have to," Steele replied. "Just let us help. That's all we're asking." Over the following months, the distribution center became permanent. The Iron Reapers partnered with local churches and businesses to keep it stocked, And what started as a spontaneous act of kindness grew into a lifeline for families who'd been struggling in silence. Steele stopped by regularly, not just to help, but to check on Ethan. The boy had gained weight, his face fuller and his energy brighter. He still brought lunch to the gas station sometimes, but now he ate it himself while sitting with Gus, the two of them talking about school and work and life beyond the curb where they first met. One afternoon, as Steele prepared to leave, Ethan ran up to him with something clutched in his hand. "I made this for you," the boy said shyly, holding out a drawing. Steele took it carefully. The picture showed a motorcycle with a figure standing beside it, one hand resting on a smaller figure's shoulder. Above them, in careful letters, Ethan had written, "Heroes don't always wear capes." Steele's throat tightened. He folded the drawing gently and tucked it into his vest pocket. "I'm keeping this," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Forever." Ethan grinned, the kind of smile that could light up a dark room. That evening, Steele sat in the clubhouse with his brothers, the drawing spread on the table in front of him. Bear leaned over to look at it and chuckled. "Kid's got you figured out," he said. Steele shook his head slowly. "Nah, I think he's got all of us figured out." Marcus raised his beer. To Ethan, "The kid who reminded us what this is supposed to be about." The others raised their drinks in agreement, a quiet toast to a boy who'd been brave enough to give away his only meal, and to a homeless man who'd accepted it with dignity, and to the biker who'd asked a simple question and discovered that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness echo the loudest. Months turned into a year. The gas station became known throughout the county as a place where people could find help without judgment. Ethan thrived in school, his grades improving as the weight of hunger lifted. Sarah found steadier work and eventually moved into a better house with a yard big enough for the flowers she loved. Gus stayed clean, kept his job, and became a volunteer at the shelter that had taken him in. And Steele? He kept writing, kept checking in, kept showing up. Because he'd learned something important on that dusty roadside curb. Strength wasn't just about how hard you could hit or how far you could ride. Sometimes it was about knowing when to stop, when to ask why, and when to reach out a hand to someone who needed it. The drawing still rode in his vest pocket, creased from the miles, but never forgotten. And every time he passed Miller's Gas and Go, he slowed down just enough to remember the boy who'd given everything away, and the truth that had broken him open in the best possible way. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is care.